Alright, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to talk Suicide Squad. But first, let me give you the context of what we were about to do. A guy I was talking to, I'm still talking to him. Apparently, this guy, he despises the DCEU, but he loves Marvel. Yeah, I know. And I did a video on a panicking Marvel tard. You remember that video with the guy who was talking about reasons why the DCEU will fail and why, what did he say? Wonder Woman would be a flop and Justice League would be a flop or some kind of thing like that. Well, on that video, it attracted a dude who he's very zealous for Marvel and he hates DC. So this guy, he starts off by talking about how the DCEU, so far, it seems to be transforming into the Transformers franchise. And he said to me, do you want your DCEU to be like the Transformers franchise? I thought to myself, you know what, that gives me a good idea. But instead of talking about the DCU being like Transformers, I thought, let me talk about Suicide Squad, which is the third movie in the DCEU. It's an origin film as well. And I'm going to compare it to some of the films out there which did not get the best kind of critical acclaim. Remember, Suicide Squad's critical acclaim is 26% of the critics liked it. 26% of them. Yeah. Okay? That's its critical reception. But there are other movies like that, and of them, one of them is Transformers. Transformers is one of those movies. Did not get the most beautiful, wonderful critical reception. And by that I mean most of the critics didn't necessarily like the movies. Well, in the case of Transformers, most of the critics did for the first Transformer franchise. I'm going to just look at the first of whatever franchise I'm looking at, right? When you look at the first Transformers franchise here, most of the critics liked it. 57% of them did, but it was still rotten because it's below 60%. 60% or more of the critics liking it. And the audience, as you can see, they love that movie. I mean, they loved it. They lapped it up. Okay, 86% on Rotten Tomatoes. And I can tell you, I was one of them. With Twilight, which is another movie, and it formed a saga of movies. Okay, you'll see why in a minute. Twilight was also a movie that also, critically speaking, 48% of the critics liked it, but the audience really dug it. 72%. That means the audience liked it. Then we have 50 Shades of Grey. 50 Shades of Grey, which is what they're liking Harley Quinn and Joker's relationship too, is really 50 Shades of Grey, because it's a relationship movie, and it's about a guy called Mr. Grey, and it's basically this romantic rapport that Grey has with a woman or woman. And as you can see, the critics, only 25% of them liked this movie. 75% of them did not like it. But however, the audience also wasn't too hot about it. In fact, 42% of them, the vast majority, 58% of them, did not like this movie. This is what Rotten Tomatoes is saying. I don't know how true it really is. We'll see in a minute, because I have a plan. And then I'm going to actually use Deadpool. You're going to be like, what? What's Deadpool doing in here? Well, Deadpool did not get bad critical reception, that's for sure. But Deadpool performed, well, I should say Suicide Squad performed a lot like Deadpool, as you will see in a minute, right? But when it comes to how these first movies did, 50 Shades of Grey, we have 50 Shades of Grey, we have Twilight, we have Transformers, we have Suicide Squad. You're going to find a pattern, okay? Suicide Squad, in terms of critical reception, 26%. Transformers, in terms of critical reception, 57%, much better than Suicide Squad. Twilight, 48% between Transformers and Suicide Squad. 50 Shades of Grey, 25%, just below Suicide Squad, okay? And of course, we're going to put Deadpool in there for a reason. Deadpool, 84%. The audience loved it, 90%, okay? 50 Shades of Grey, 50 Shades of Grey, the audience didn't necessarily like it, but they went to see it anyway. Twilight, the audience liked it a lot. Transformers, the audience loved it. Suicide Squad, the audience liked it. Okay, so let's get to it. Let's get to the actual now box office. Now, what does the box office do here? So let me just make it clear to you guys. The box office actually clarifies or validates Rotten Tomatoes, right? When we look at Suicide Squad, its box office is staggering, really. It has a budget of 175 million, so it needed 350 million to break even. Basically, it almost made 350 million domestically. Okay? Anytime it makes 350 million domestically, it'll break even. And then worldwide, it made 742 million. That is a lot of money. Let's just put it that way. That's 420 million more than its domestic. Okay? That's quite a lot. And it's close to 400 million more. It's close to 400 million more than its overall cost, which would be 350 million. So that's very, very, very good. Okay. Now, when we look at Transformers cost 150 million to make. It made 709 million. That's 409 million more than it cost to make. And it made back its money and 19 million in its domestic gross. Impressive. Very impressive. Twilight cost 37 million to make. Only 37 million. So it made back its money and some, okay, in its domestic gross. Because 37 million, 74 million is what it needed to make back its money. It made back that, and it grossed in 120 million extra. That's just domestic. Internationally, it made 393 million, which is more than 10 times what its production budget was. Okay. I mean, you can't get it better than that. Twilight did so well. Now, there's a very important thing I want you guys to understand. All of these movies I'm talking about, they went on to have follow-up movies. Transformers had 3 movies after that. Twilight had 4 movies after that. Okay, 50 Shades of Grey just had its follow-up movie, which is I think 50 Shades of Darker or something like that, or 50 Gray Shades of Darker or something like that. I can't remember what the name of it is, but anyway, 50 Shades of Grey was 40 million it took to make. Blew that away in its domestic total. It made basically 120 million more than that. It grossed in a whooping $571 million worldwide. So, I mean, that was a highly profitable film, more profitable than even Deadpool. It's a ridiculously profitable film, okay? And then, of course, Deadpool, we all know about Deadpool. 58 million it was used to make. It more than made back its money. It made 260 something million more than its overall cost, and a whooping 782 million. We're talking about 783 million. Okay, so Deadpool, but Deadpool, remember, had great critical reception, right? Now, those are the overall, tallies for it, but that doesn't really tell the story about what actually happened. Did people give it good word of mouth? Blah, 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 blah. So let's look at Suicide Squad first. When we look at Suicide Squad right now, it's gone 10 weekends straight over $1 million, and it has done double-digit amounts, okay, double-digit millions for 5 weekends straight. 5 weekends straight. And that's phenomenal. Okay? Only matched by Deadpool. Deadpool is the only other movie to do that this year, at least. Double digits for 5 weekends. 5 weekends. Okay? Deadpool did over $1 million for 9 weekends straight. And that's impressive. 9 straight weekends we're talking about. Okay? When we look at Transformers, the first Transformers film, 4 weekends straight, it was double-digit millions, and then it went on to make millions for 9 weekends straight, and then it went on to make over $1 million for 2 more weekends. So in the end, it did it for 11 weekends straight. That's pretty impressive. It's pretty impressive. That's better than Suicide Squad at present. I don't know what it's going to make this weekend. If it does make over $1 million this weekend, it'll match Transformers. So Transformers even did better than Deadpool in that respect. However, double-digit millions, it only did it for 4 weekends straight. So Deadpool beat him back that, and also Suicide Squad. Twilight. When we look at the weekends with Twilight, Twilight made double-digit millions for 3 weekends, which is typical, and then it went on to rake over $1 million for 9 weekends straight, matching Deadpool. 50 Shades of Grey. 50 Shades of Grey began with a whooping total, 93 million in its extended weekend, and it was able to do over $1 million for 3 weekends, and then it stayed over $1 million for 6 weekends straight, which is not necessarily great. It's actually kind of poor. So those are the films that we're talking about. You saw the critical reception of them. Of course, Deadpool is the exception, but I want to keep Deadpool there for a reason. Now let's look at their multipliers, shall we? The multipliers now will echo the sentiments here. You can see that this kind of fizzled out. So let's see what the multiplier for 50 Shades of Grey is first. We're going to divide this number by this number, and what will we get? We'll use our trusty calculator here. 166,167,230. And we divided that number by 93 million and 10,350. And we get 1.78654 or 1.79. And you know that number, once it's less than 2, it says it's top heavy. So it really made the bulk of its money, as you can see. It made the bulk of its money in the first 6 weeks, yes, but mostly in its opening weekend. Alright? Its opening weekend balance is actually more than all the other weekends. The other 2 to 12 weekends didn't make as much money as its opening weekends. Top heavy, we call that, because its number is less than 2. Let's look at Deadpool's multiplier, shall we? So we're going to divide this number here by this number down here, because it was an extended weekend, 152 million. Okay, so when we do that, let's see what we get. 363 million and 70,709 divided by 152,193,853. You get a multiplier of 2.38, 2.39 is its multiplier, which is significantly better than 50 Shades of Grey. 2.39. It's pretty good. It's a pretty good multiplier. 2.39. 50 Shades of Grey was 1.79. Significantly lower. Okay. Let's look at Twilight. So Twilight opened at 69 million, 70 million basically, and its domestic total was 193 million. So let's see what that looks like. 769,854 divided by 69,637,740. We get a multiplier of 2.76 or 2.77. That's very good. So the word of mouth for this film, even though this film went for 9 weekends It had very, very good word of mouth. 2.77. That's the highest multiplier we've seen so far. Okay? So Twilight has the highest multiplier. Very good word of mouth for Twilight. Very good word of mouth for, well, good word of mouth for Deadpool. Poor word of mouth for 50 Shades of Grey. But 50 Shades of Grey made a ton of money though. Right? Let's look at Transformers. This is the first Transformer movie. It started off with 70 million or 71 million, and it ended up with a domestic gross of 319,246,193. Now people really love this film. They loved it. Like, you look at Transformers audience reception, 86% means they love the film. Just like with Deadpool, they love the film. I'm going to talk more about Transformers in a minute, but why also Suicide Squad and Deadpool and Twilight are different to Transformers. But let's just get into the actual multipliers for this film. So Transformers, you divide 319,246,193 by 70,502,384. What do you get? You get a ridiculous multiplier of 4.53. So this multiplier is twice as big as Deadpool and Twilight. It's ridiculous, right? And so I told you before, people really love this movie. But why is that multiplier so? Okay, let me give you guys a little hint as to why that is so. The first reason is Transformers is not like Twilight. It's not like Deadpool. It's not like Suicide Squad. It's not like 50 Shades of Grey. It's a movie that targets all ages. Even though it says it's PG-13, little kids can still go in and see this movie. It's a family movie. So it's not just one person or two people going to see this movie. It's a family of 4 or 3 or 5 that's going to see this movie. And so you got to pay for these tickets. And I tell you, the first Transformers movie was really awesome for a lot of people. Even though following the action was also kind of difficult sometimes because you couldn't tell the different parts of the Transformers, which I thought was Michael Bay's problem. But he did kind of flush it out later on. Also, there was a Transformers television series going on. People were dying to see another Transformers movie. I think the best Transformers animated movie I have ever seen was the one in which they looked like Transformers. It was an actual animation, a kind of almost like a CG animation. It was really awesome. Alright, so much for Transformers. 4.5 something. It's really fantastic right there. So, like I said, now Suicide Squad, its multiplier is currently 322,960,679 divided by 133,682,248. Which gives us a multiplier of 2.415, 2.42. So 2.42 you're looking at there when it comes to Suicide Squad, which fits somewhere between Twilight and Deadpool. And then you have Transformers, which is ahead of everybody, 4 point something. And then you have 50 Shades of Grey, which is at the back. Now, it's very important to understand, however, like I said, that the Transformers movie, it did very, very well because, one, it is a movie for a family. It's a family movie. Here's another important thing that people may have to remember as well. That the Transformers movie also pulled in money from China. Now, Deadpool and Suicide Squad did not have the benefit of pulling from China. If you look at all the foreign countries here, China is not one of them for Suicide Squad. And also, if you look at Deadpool's foreign countries, you do not see China for Deadpool either. It's very important to remember. Let's see if China was present for 50 Shades of Grey. And the answer is no. 50 Shades of Grey also shares that commonality in that China is not there in its market. How about Twilight? Does Twilight share China? And the answer to that question is no. Twilight does not share China either in its raking in of its earnings. So these are some things that are common with Suicide Squad and with Deadpool, 50 Shades of Grey, Twilight, that are not common with Transformers, or any of the Transformers movies for that matter. And some of the Transformers movies were highly aided by China. In fact, the final Transformers movie, which came out, which broke $1 billion, it broke $1 billion because of China. If China wasn't in the equation, it would only make $784 million. I'm just showing you. But the important thing you need to understand is that all of these movies that we're talking about, were the beginning of sequel movies. And so I can see Deadpool's sequel being a successful movie. I see a sequel for Suicide Squad being successful as well, because of how they performed. And there's the Suicide Squad and Deadpool, 50 Shades of Grey, and Twilight, which also had sagas after that and did very well. All of these movies we're talking about did not have China to support them. And like I said, the difference between Transformers, which is a family movie, and Suicide Squad, Twilight, 50 Shades of Grey, and Deadpool is that all of those movies I just mentioned, they deal with targeted audiences. Targeted audiences. But even so, the Transformers was aided by China, which gave it 32% of its millions. Not 32%, sorry. Made 32 million, contributed 32 million to its total. Even with that, Transformers did not surpass Suicide Squad in its overall gross. Isn't that interesting? Suicide Squad did better than the first Transformers movie. And if you take away 32 million from that, it's really 668 million it actually made. You look at the first Twilight movie, which was very successful, very, very successful, but it only made 393 million. Of course, the other subsequent Twilight movies blew up. In fact, I think the final Twilight movie made more than Suicide Squad is currently made. And then you have 50 Shades of Grey, and 50 Shades of Grey did remarkably well, but again, it didn't gross more than Suicide Squad. The only movie to gross more than Suicide Squad at present is Deadpool, domestically and also worldwide. However, internationally, it has grossed less than Suicide Squad. And you can have a look at that, and that made news a while back. Okay? Now, what does this mean? It means that Suicide Squad has a lot more in common with the Twilight movies, the Twilight Saga movies, and Deadpool than it does Transformers. In fact, the DCEU movies have more in common with the Twilight Saga, or with maybe 50 Shades of Grey and its sequel, than they do with Transformers. In fact, Suicide Squad has much more in common with Deadpool than it does with Transformers. Okay, because Transformers basically targets a general audience. You can bring your family to that. Suicide Squad is not that kind of movie. It was a target group between the ages of 12 to your early 30s. Deadpool was the same thing. It was for restricted, so it was for adult audiences. It was even more restricted than Suicide Squad. But even though I think the same set of people went to see Deadpool, like I said before, and I wouldn't be surprised. Again, Twilight appeals to probably teenagers all the way up to the early 30s, younger people. It was very successful in that respect. The critics didn't quite get it. Now, as to a movie being panned as bad as Suicide Squad and still doing so well, None of these movies, except for 50 Shades of Grey, had a worse reviewing than Suicide Squad. And 50 Shades of Grey was top heavy, telling me that the audience didn't actually like 50 Shades of Grey as much and had a good word of mouth. And we also saw it in its multiplier 1.80, or 1.79, where it basically just made the bulk of its money in its feature week, but the second week it dropped off, and it just dropped off completely. So it's not really a movie where the audience really carried it and there was good word of mouth for 50 Shades of Grey, which is reflected in its Rotten Tomatoes score. So Rotten Tomatoes pretty much hit the nail on the head with that one. With Twilight, on the other hand, we saw that Twilight had a remarkable run, 9 weeks, just keeping going there, and it has a multiplier which is the second best multiplier after Transformers. It was really good word of mouth for Twilight, and Twilight, ran as long as it did, and that's reflective in the rating for it. Same thing with Transformers. Transformers went a record 11 weeks, not in a row, but 9 weeks in a row, and then 2 more weeks, and made a ton of money, not as much as Suicide Squad, but made a ton of money. And on top of that, it's reflective in its Rotten Tomato scores, where the audience loved this movie, loved it just like Deadpool, and that's why it made what it made. And that's why it had really good word of mouth for it, and that's why it did so well. My point anyway is this: that the person was talking about the DCU being compared to Transformers. Transformers is a different kind of movie and a different comic and a different brand altogether. And the appeal of Transformers comes from the actual robots themselves, what we call their merchandise. Transformers has been merchandising forever. I remember playing with Transformer toys. That's what the fun of Transformers was, playing with the toys and seeing them transform. So Michael Bay did an excellent job with that, and he's done it consistently, movie after movie, in that Transformers and what they are, more or less, in their stories, more or less he captured, on the screen. He added a little bit more depth to it, actually, if you ask me. When it comes to the Twilight Saga, well, the Twilight Sagas, again, they're this book that this movie's made after, and for the people who love the book and the people who go see the movie, it had a captured audience to that, and the audience was faithful to the end, and it made a ton of money in its sagas. And to be fair to the Twilight Saga, again, it was a continuity of films. It was a continuity. The story was continuously being told. In fact, the second to last story was a part 1 of a part 2. So all I'm saying is, it was very unorthodox in how it carried about itself. And this movie had some depth. It had an interesting concept, an interesting idea, and therefore it appealed to people, and they responded accordingly. And it was consistent in its appeal throughout. The Twilight Saga has done remarkably well since its first movie. And again, the point is, Rotten Tomatoes captured that, right? 50 Shades of Grey, we already talked about that. Deadpool, again, Rotten Tomatoes captured it accurately, in that Deadpool goes on to do excellently well, wonderfully well. And Rotten Tomatoes has also captured the fact that Suicide Squad is a hit. Of course, once critical reception is kind of low, it kind of brings down the audience rating, which is what you saw with. But once again, Suicide Squad, the audience loved it. 66% is not bad at all. So my point anyway is this: if you look at the user ratings, it tells you something. Alright? User ratings, this is what they rated it. It's basically a 7.2 out of 10, which is pretty much around the ballpoint figure of what Suicide Squad was rated. The critics had it at 4.7 out of 10. But you will see that the amount of people that rated this movie, 126,000 people, 323. Let's look at Transformers. How many people rated Transformers? A whooping 2,383,321 people. That really pulled out people to rate it. Twilight had 625,706 people. That's a whooping set of people. With 50 Shades of Grey, only 81 1,963 people. So that's not a whole lot of people. And Deadpool, 179 million. Suicide Squad is like the 5th highest out of 6 of them. Deadpool's a little higher, I think, in terms of interest, because it shows how many people were interested in the movie, at least, and went to Rotten Tomatoes and actually made a comment. So less people now go to Rotten Tomatoes and leave their comments. But nonetheless, the point is, you see a pattern, you see a trend. Suicide Squad is definitely following after Deadpool. And Suicide Squad seems to have the strength that didn't matter what Rotten Tomatoes did, it was going to follow in the footsteps of Deadpool. But now we have one more movie that we need to also think about. And that movie is Twilight. Okay? Twilight. Now, Twilight didn't do as well as Suicide Squad or Deadpool in its first take on the thing. But in its second and third and fourth and fifth, it did very, very well. But the point is that Twilight and the Twilight Saga shows that a specific demographic can like a movie, and the critics don't necessarily have to like it. Whether they like it or they don't like it, it wasn't designed for them. You know, Deadpool still appealed to most people, but it had the big old restricted thing on it, so that people who actually go in to review Deadpool would be people who would actually be interested in watching Deadpool. You get what I'm saying? That little restricted rating helps to kind of put things in context. Believe that Twilight, if I'm not mistaken, was a PG-13 film. Yeah, PG-13. It was romance, but it was PG-13 film. PG-13 can be interpreted so many different ways. With Suicide Squad, it's on the R rating side of the PG-13. When you look at Transformers, for instance, which is also, I believe, PG-13, yep, it's more on the PG side of PG-13. Most of Marvel, the MCU's films, are on the PG side of PG-13. You can't say that for the X-Men films, though. The X-Men films are more on the R side of the PG-13 film. So what I'm trying to say to you, 50 Shades of Grey is an R film. You know, it did very well for an R film. And Deadpool's an R film. I'm trying to show you something. That the rating of a film, sometimes critics do not read into it. You have to, as a critic, also understand, even though something says it's PG-13, Batman 1989 is on the R side of the PG-13 film. Okay? I like Batman 1989. I go back and I watch it on occasion because I like it. It's one of my classic films. Okay? It never gets old for me because it had such an impact on me as a kid. It's on the R side. Batman Returns is on the R side of PG-13. Okay? That's the kind of film that the DCEU is. Even Man of Steel is somewhat closer to, it's not an R, it's more of a, it's very realistic though. It's PG-13, but it's not on the PG side of PG-13, somewhere in the middle. And then as the movie is ending, it kind of gets to the R side of things. But then it comes back to the middle. So Man of Steel is probably the only family film in the DCEU. But then after that, Batman v Superman is really more of the R side of the film. And then Suicide Squad is more on the R side of the DCEU. Transformers movies are not that. So that's why when people try to compare these movies to Transformers, Transformers made the bulk of money it did because of China and because it was a family film. Twilight, Suicide Squad, and Deadpool, even 50 Shades of Grey, all did it the hard way. They had targeted audiences which the film would appeal to, and anybody else that target group is a plus. And that's the difference between Transformers, Suicide Squad, Twilight, 50 Shades of Grey, and Deadpool. And even though Deadpool has been rated more favorably, because it's an R film as well, I guess, and 50 Shades of Grey was trashed for some reason or the other, I would say that those films, again, went to targeted audiences, and the critics either got them or didn't get them, but it didn't really matter because at the end of the day, the audience was going to like these films or not like the films. Okay, 50 Shades of Grey suffered from dislike I don't know why. A lot of people went out to see it at first, and then they stopped. Deadpool sustained because it had a fan base. Suicide Squad now has a fan base. If you do a sequel to Suicide Squad, that fan base will be faithful to it. It's now acquired a fan base. Transformers has its fan base, which is why people still go and see Transformers, even though it's going to be 5 movies in. Twilight had its fan base, and anytime somebody redoes a Twilight movie, people are going to go see it. A certain type of people are going to go see it. So I hope this makes sense to you guys, and I just wanted to clarify for the guy who's saying that the DCU is like, you know, the Transformers franchise. The DCU is like the Transformers universe. I disagree heavily. I think that the DCU is actually the marketing strategy, and the film is actually made for target audiences. Wonder Woman is coming out next. Again, Wonder Woman is going to be more on the mature side of PG-13. I don't expect Wonder Woman to be anything short of that. However, I think it's going to have an exception. It's going to be a little bit different in that even though it's PG-13, I think it's going to appeal to, because it has to, it was going to appeal to almost every age group of girl and boy and woman and man. Mainly because this movie can be very influential in shaping the future of our society and how women are supposed to be seen in our society, especially in light of what Donald Trump has been saying about women and what he's doing. I think this film is going to be very progressive in that respect, and I think Wonder Woman symbolizes so much that I think Patty Jenkins is definitely going to hit the nail on the head. She's not going to go so advanced that little children can't be impacted by this Wonder Woman, but I do believe there's still going to be a lot of mature elements to this film, and it's still going to primarily be designed for adults, but children are going to be able to come in. This may be the first DCEU, the second DCEU family film. I think that the first one was Man of Steel. You know, people didn't like how it ended, but I think this one, I think because it's a woman doing it, I think Patty Jenkins is really invested in this. I think she's going to do an excellent job. I think this is going to be the DCEU's most successful film. But we have to wait and see. It does not matter what the critics say with this film, because I think there's an inbuilt market for this film. Women are looking forward to seeing dimensions of women, types of women, as persons, as human beings captured, but their world. And I'm hoping that Patty Jenkins can nail that, because if she does, she, you know, hopefully she brings in other ingredients than just a strong woman, and you know, women can be. Don't be so basic. I'm hoping that it gets complex in that respect with women, you know, because women are much more complex. They see the world a certain sort of way, and I'm hoping that you can have all these different types of women in this movie, because I don't think today a comic book movie has explored different types of women. I don't think so. So that would be wonderful, you know, the oddness, the eccentricities of women. I'm hoping it's not just a Hollywood woman that's strong. No, I'm hoping they explore different aspects of women. So we'll see. I think they will. And I don't think just women, but men too. And I think it's going to be cleverly done. I'm looking forward to it, actually. Very much. I'm looking forward to very much Wonder Woman, because I think this movie, I just hope that Patty Jenkins' vision is not, you know, in any way, not indication of any way, you know, tampered with by Warner Brothers. I'm just hoping not. You know, I don't have a problem with Zack Snyder doing the action sequences. I just don't want anybody to tamper with Patty Jenkins' vision. I want it to be her vision. I want to see her vision on the screen. And not goopty ga. I want it to be, you know, flowing and stuff, you know, because I want it to be able to be something that people can look back and say, this was the Wonder Woman movie. This movie taught me things. This movie helped shape children's lives of how women should be treated, how women are, how you can aspire to be a woman in this way or that way or in the other way. So I'm hoping you know, that's what that movie does. It's a period piece as well, even though it's fiction. It should be very, very, very interesting. I'm hoping Wonder Woman that we see in the comics will come to life on the big screen, you know. But anyway, that's besides the point. My point is this, that Suicide Squad now has an inbuilt fan base. The DCEU has an inbuilt fan base. It doesn't really matter what you say or do. The DCEU is going to thrive because there's an inbuilt fan base. More people are coming into the DCEU, people from Marvel and so on. Doesn't mean that they're not going to watch Marvel movies. It just means that more people, the crossover is starting to happen now. Suicide Squad was pretty much the beginning of that genesis. Batman v Superman was defended very well by the fans, showing that there's a strong core base, and that's very important. And I think that was an excellent job done there as well. So on that note, I hope you guys enjoyed my video. Have a good one.